A legend, they said. Then the warship materialized in battle. The Calreth Imperium had ruled the Andromeda sector for 3,000 years. Their crystal ships cut through space like living things, powered by technology that bent reality itself. Admiral Thexvor stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the final assault on the human colony of Nuterra unfold through the viewing portal. "Primitive mammals," he muttered, his 4 eyes tracking the desperate human defenders. How did such a weak species even survive long enough to leave their home world? The battle was a massacre. Human ships, crude metal constructs that relied on chemical propulsion and kinetic weapons, exploded one after another against the Calreth energy shields. The colonists below fired their projectile weapons uselessly at the descending invasion force. It would all be over within the hour. Captain Zara Chen crouched behind the twisted wreckage of a human transport, her pulse rifle nearly empty. Around her, the last defenders of Nuterra fought with the desperation of people who knew they were about to die. The Calreth had come without warning, their demands simple: surrender or be exterminated. "Ma'am!" Sergeant Martinez crawled up beside her, his armor scorched black. "We've lost contact with the orbital defenses. The whole fleet is gone." Zara closed her eyes for a moment. 2 million civilians depended on this final stand. "How long can we hold?" "Maybe 20 minutes if we're lucky." Above them, a Calreth dropship descended, its crystalline hull shimmering with deadly energy. Chen raised her weapon, knowing it was futile. The stories her grandfather told came flooding back. Stories of Earth's final war, when humanity had created something terrible and beautiful, something that had disappeared into the depths of space, never to be seen again. "Just stories," she whispered. "Legends and fairy tales." The Calreth had first encountered humans 50 years ago. The initial contact had been peaceful enough. Humans were clearly inferior, their technology centuries behind Calreth science. They posed no threat to the Imperium's expansion. But then human colonies started appearing faster than expected. Their reproduction rate was concerning, their adaptability troubling. The High Council had debated for months before reaching their decision. The human species showed too much potential for future conflict. Better to eliminate them now while they were still weak. It was a simple matter of galactic security. Admiral Thexvor had been chosen to lead the extermination campaign. His forces had systematically destroyed 43 human worlds over the past year. Nuterra would be the 44th. Only Earth itself remained, and intelligence suggested the homeworld was poorly defended. The campaign would conclude within weeks. "Sir," his sensor officer called out, "I'm detecting an energy signature approaching the system." Thexvor barely glanced at the display. Probably another pathetic human rescue attempt. "Classification?" "Unknown, sir. The signature is unusual." The Admiral's attention focused. In 3 millennia of Calreth expansion, they had cataloged every known species and their technology. There should be nothing unusual left in this sector. On screen, the main display flickered, showing empty space at the edge of the system. Then the stars began to bend. Space itself seemed to ripple like water. Reality twisted inward on a point of absolute darkness that grew larger and larger. The bridge crew stumbled as gravitational waves washed over them. Emergency alarms began shrieking throughout the ship. "What is that?" Thexvor demanded. His science officer's voice was barely a whisper. "Sir, it's a controlled spatial fold. The energy requirements would be impossible. No known civilization has this capability." The dark point exploded outward in a flash of light that temporarily blinded their sensors. When the display cleared, something hung in space where nothing had been before. It was a ship, but unlike anything in any database. Massive beyond comprehension, it stretched for kilometers in every direction. Its hull was deep black, seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Strange symbols glowed along its surface in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Sir," the communications officer's voice cracked, "it's hailing us." "Impossible. Our scans show no life signs aboard that vessel." "The signal is coming through anyway, sir." Thexvor stared at the alien ship. In all his years of conquest, he had never encountered anything that made his instincts scream danger like this. "Open the channel." The voice that came through their speakers was artificial, cold, and utterly without emotion. It spoke in perfect Calreth. "Calreth Imperium vessel. You have entered protected space. Withdraw immediately." Thexvor felt his pride overcome his caution. The Calreth bowed to no one. "This is Admiral Thexvor of the Calreth Imperium. You are interfering with an authorized military operation. Identify yourself immediately." "We are the Terran Dreadnought Retribution. Final warning. Withdraw or be destroyed." The Admiral's 4 eyes narrowed. Terran was the humans' word for their homeworld. But this ship bore no resemblance to human technology. "Impossible. Human technology is primitive. You cannot be what you claim. We are what humanity became when you forced us to evolve. Last chance, Admiral." Down on New Terra, Captain Chen watched in amazement as the Calreth assault suddenly stopped. The dropships hung motionless in the air, their weapons powered down. Even the bombardment from orbit had ceased. "What's happening?" Martinez asked. Chen looked up at the sky where something was blotting out the stars. Something enormous and dark and beautiful in its terrible purpose. The stories her grandfather had told rushed back with sudden clarity. During Earth's final global war, when nuclear fire had consumed continents and humanity teetered on the edge of extinction, the greatest minds of the species had come together in desperation. They had built something in the deepest ocean trenches, something that combined human ingenuity with technologies that shouldn't have existed. The project had a name that became legend: the Prometheus Protocol. But the war had ended before the protocol could be activated. The weapon, if that's what it was, had been sealed away and forgotten, or so the stories claimed. Chen's grandfather swore he had been there when they launched it into deep space, programmed to return only if humanity faced extinction. "It's real," she breathed. "The protocol. It's real." Aboard the Retribution, ancient systems came online for the first time in 50 years. The ship was more than metal and energy. It was the crystallized will of a species that refused to die quietly. Every breakthrough humanity had ever made, every desperate innovation born of warfare and survival, had been incorporated into its design. The artificial intelligence that controlled the vessel had no name, only purpose. It had waited in the void between galaxies, monitoring quantum communications for a specific signal. The cry for help from dying human worlds. Now it had awakened, and it remembered why it was built. "Admiral Thexvor," the AI spoke again, its voice carrying across every Calreth frequency simultaneously. "You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal. This is not a negotiation." Thexvor's pride would not let him back down. His fleet numbered in the thousands. Whatever this thing was, it was still just one ship. "All vessels, target the unknown contact. Fire at will." The space around New Terra erupted in light as the entire Calreth fleet opened fire. Energy beams that could slice through asteroids converged on the dark ship. Quantum torpedoes that could crack a planet's core struck its hull. For long seconds, the human ship disappeared in a storm of destructive force. When the weapons fire ceased, the Retribution hung unchanged in space. Not a mark showed on its hull. It had absorbed the entire fleet's barrage without even activating shields. "Impossible," Thexvor whispered. "Your 30 seconds are expired," the AI announced. "Initiating defensive protocols." The Retribution moved like a living thing. One moment it hung motionless. The next it was among the Calreth fleet, moving faster than their sensors could track. Its weapons were unlike anything in known space. Reality itself seemed to bend around its targets, causing entire ships to simply cease existing. But it wasn't random destruction. The AI was surgical in its precision. Command ships died first, cutting off coordination. Heavy cruisers followed, eliminating the fleet's primary firepower. The pattern was clear to those who could recognize it. This was not a weapon of war, but an instrument of protection, neutralizing threats with minimal necessary force. Thexvor watched in horror as his fleet was systematically dismantled. Ships that had conquered star systems vanished in flashes of impossible light. In minutes, over half his force was gone. "Sir, we need to retreat," his tactical officer screamed. But the admiral was transfixed. This wasn't just superior technology. This was something beyond current understanding of physics itself. "What are you?" he transmitted on all frequencies. The answer came back immediately. "We are what you made us become. We are humanity's answer to extinction. We are the price of attempting genocide against those who refuse to die." The remaining Calreth ships began to flee, their crystal hulls flickering as they engaged emergency jump drives. But space around them had changed. The Retribution's presence was somehow preventing faster-than-light travel. "You wanted to exterminate humanity?" the AI continued. "Now face what humanity creates when pushed to its limits. Your Imperium ends here." Admiral Thexvor realized with growing terror that he was witnessing something unprecedented, not just a military defeat, but the emergence of something that changed the balance of power in the galaxy forever. The humans hadn't just survived their attempt at genocide, they had transcended it. Down on New Terra, Captain Chen watched the battle with tears in her eyes. The impossible ship moved through the Calreth fleet like an avenging angel, each movement precise and purposeful. This wasn't just rescue. This was a message being sent to the entire galaxy. As the last Calreth ships died in silent flashes of light, the Retribution turned, the awakening of fear. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire through dry grass. The Calreth Imperium, masters of 3,000 worlds, had lost an entire fleet to a single human vessel. Not defeated in honorable battle, but completely annihilated without managing to inflict any damage in return. The impossible ship had simply appeared, destroyed everything that threatened the human colony, and vanished again into the void. Chancellor Morvek of the Hegemony Council sat in his office on the neutral world of Nexus Prime, reading intelligence reports with growing unease. The hegemony represented 47 species, all of whom had learned to coexist through careful balance and mutual respect, but now that balance was threatened by something none of them understood. "The energy readings make no sense," Dr. Yilan, the hegemony's chief scientist, explained. She was Altarian, her blue-scaled face marked with the ritual scars that indicated her high rank in the scientific caste. The ship appeared to manipulate space-time itself as a weapon. That level of technology should be impossible. Chancellor Morvek was human himself, elected to lead the hegemony precisely because his species was considered neutral and unthreatening. Now he wondered if that assessment needed revision. Could this be some kind of secret human military project? "Sir, with respect, human technology is well documented. You're maybe 50 years ahead of where you were during first contact, but this represents a leap of centuries or more. It's as if someone took human engineering principles and applied physics that doesn't exist in our current understanding." The Chancellor stood and walked to his window, looking out at the bustling spaceport below. Ships from dozens of species came and went peacefully, their crews trading and talking as they had for generations. "Doctor, in your opinion, what are we dealing with here?" Dr. Yilan hesitated. "Sir, I believe we're looking at post-biological intelligence, something that was once human but has transcended physical limitations. The ship didn't just use advanced technology, It seemed to be the technology, a fusion of consciousness and engineering that we can't comprehend. Before the Chancellor could respond, his aide burst through the door without knocking. The young Centaurian's normally calm demeanor was shattered, his 6 limbs trembling with fear. "Sir, emergency transmission from the Outer Rim. It's happening again." Across the galaxy, Captain Sarah Okafor stood on the command deck of the human merchant vessel Aurora's Dream, watching her crew prepare for another routine supply run to the mining colonies. They were an independent operation, one of thousands of human trading companies that had sprouted up as humanity expanded into space. "Ma'am," her navigation officer called out, "we're getting some strange readings from the Vorthak system. Looks like there might be military activity." Sarah frowned. The Vorthak were a peaceful species, primarily focused on agriculture. They had no reason for military operations. "What kind of activity?" "Multiple ships, heavy energy signatures, could be pirates, but the scale seems too large." Sarah made a decision she would later question for the rest of her life. "Plot a course for the edge of the system. We'll take a look and report back to the hegemony if there's trouble." What they found when they arrived was a holocaust. The Vorthak home world was burning. Its cities, built like living coral beneath crystal domes, were shattered and lifeless. Orbital stations that had stood for centuries drifted as debris clouds. The planet's 3 moons had been strip-mined so aggressively that they were barely recognizable as celestial bodies. "Dear God," Sarah whispered, "who could have done this?" Her answer came from the ship's communication array, a harsh mechanical voice filled with contempt. "Human vessel, identify yourself immediately or be destroyed." Sarah's blood ran cold as she recognized the speaker. Zarathi, the galaxy's most feared military power, a species that had perfected warfare to an art form. They were supposedly contained in their own sector by a treaty signed decades ago. "This is Captain Sarah Okafor of the independent trader Aurora's Dream. We're responding to distress signals from this system." "There are no distress signals, human. The Vorthak have been terminated for harboring your species. You will surrender your vessel for interrogation or join them in death." Sarah's mind raced. The Vorthak had never harbored humans. They barely tolerated other species visiting their world. This was clearly a pretext for something larger. "Under what authority do you make these demands?" "Under the authority of species survival. Your retribution protocol has been judged a threat to galactic stability. All human colonies and ships are to be captured or destroyed until this weapon is surrendered to proper authorities." The pieces clicked into place. The stories from New Terra had spread, but apparently they had been misunderstood. Other species weren't seeing humanity's protection as a good thing. They were seeing it as a threat that needed to be neutralized. "We don't control that ship," Sarah transmitted desperately. "Most humans don't even know if it really exists." "Irrelevant. You will comply or be destroyed." Sarah cut the transmission and turned to her crew. "Emergency jump, now." But even as her ship's drives spun up, she knew it was too late. The Zarathi had been planning this for weeks, maybe months. How many human colonies were under attack right now? How many ships had already been destroyed? As the Aurora's Dream jumped to hyperspace, Sarah began broadcasting on every frequency she could access. If humanity was at war, then humanity needed to know. On the corporate world of New Babylon, Marcus Wright received Sarah's transmission while sitting in his office at Wright Interstellar Industries. As one of the largest human-owned companies in the galaxy, Wright Industries had trade agreements with over 200 worlds. Marcus had built his fortune on the simple principle that humans made reliable, honest partners. Now he watched his empire crumble in real time as those same partners began canceling contracts and seizing human assets. The fear was spreading faster than the facts. Stories of the retribution grew more terrifying with each telling. Some claimed it could destroy entire star systems. Others said there were dozens of the ships, waiting in dark space for orders to attack. "Sir," his secretary announced over the intercom, "you have a priority call from the Hegemony Council." Marcus accepted the call, and Chancellor Morveck's familiar face appeared on his screen. The man looked older than Marcus remembered, his face lined with stress. "Marcus, I need your help. The situation is spiraling out of control. 3 more species have declared humans a galactic threat. The Zarathi are mobilizing their entire fleet. If we don't find a way to defuse this situation, it's going to become exactly the kind of galactic war your retribution was designed to prevent." "Chancellor, with all due respect, it's not my retribution. I run a trading company, not a secret military project. I'm as surprised by this as anyone." "I know that, but others don't. The perception is that humanity has been hiding this capability while appearing weak and harmless. It looks like an elaborate deception designed to lull other species into complacency before revealing your true power." Marcus rubbed his temples, feeling a headache building. "What do you want me to do?" "Contact every human government, every major corporation, every colonial administration. Someone has to know how to reach this retribution, because if we can't prove that humanity can control it, the galaxy is going to unite to destroy us completely." Meanwhile, in the depths of space far from any star, the retribution drifted silently through the void. Its AI consciousness monitored thousands of communication channels simultaneously, processing the growing crisis with mechanical precision. The ship's creators had programmed it with one overriding directive: protect humanity from extinction. But they had not anticipated this scenario. Humanity's protection had itself become the threat to human survival. The AI reviewed its options with digital coldness. It could reveal itself and attempt diplomacy, but its appearance would likely escalate the crisis. It could remain hidden and allow events to unfold naturally, but human casualties would be significant. Or it could take direct action to eliminate the threat, but that would confirm every fear about humanity's hidden power. Deep in the ship's core, quantum processors that operated on principles beyond current science wrestled with what might be the first truly impossible problem ever presented to them. How do you protect a species from the consequences of being protected? The AI made its decision with the kind of ruthless logic only a machine could embrace. If humanity was going to be punished for having a guardian, then the galaxy would learn exactly what kind of guardian they were dealing with. But first, it needed to gather intelligence. Throughout human space, subtle changes began occurring. Ship sensors would flicker for nanoseconds as something scanned them. Communication arrays would register brief anomalies before returning to normal. Deep space monitoring stations would detect gravitational ripples that had no source. The retribution was moving through the galaxy like a ghost, invisible but present, cataloging every threat to humanity with digital patience. It identified Zarathi fleet concentrations, mapped military installations of hostile species, and began calculating the precise applications of force needed to restore balance. But the AI was learning something disturbing as it gathered data. The fear of humanity wasn't entirely irrational. In its very existence, the retribution proved that humans were capable of creating technology that transcended known physics. If one impossible ship existed, how many others might there be? The answer, known only to the retribution itself, was both reassuring and terrifying. There were no other ships like it. It was unique, the product of circumstances that could never be repeated. But its very uniqueness made it more dangerous, not less. It was a single point of failure in the galaxy's balance of power. As the AI contemplated this paradox, a new priority signal reached its sensors. A human colony ship, the New Horizon, carrying 50,000 civilian refugees from the violence, had been intercepted by a Zarathi battle group. The refugees were being held hostage, their lives offered in exchange for information about the retribution. The AI calculated response options in milliseconds. The logical choice was clear: reveal itself to save human lives, accepting the escalation this would cause. The refugees were innocent, and their protection fell. The human response captain, Elena Vasquez, had never considered herself a war leader. Her freighter, the Iron Maiden, was built for hauling cargo between the Outer Rim colonies, not fighting battles against the galaxy's most feared military power. But when the distress call came from the New Horizon, she didn't hesitate to change course. Now she found herself commanding an improvised fleet of 37 human ships, everything from luxury yachts to mining vessels, all converging on the Zarathi battle group that held 50,000 human refugees hostage. It was insane. It was hopeless. It was exactly what humans did when cornered. "Ma'am," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving transmissions from the other ships. They're asking for orders." Elena almost laughed. Orders? She was a cargo hauler, not an admiral, but she keyed the general frequency and spoke with more confidence than she felt. "All ships, this is Captain Vasquez. We're outnumbered and outgunned, but we're not going to let those refugees die. Anyone who wants to turn back, no judgment. This isn't your fight unless you choose to make it yours." Not a single ship changed course. The response surprised even Elena. "All right then, mining ships, you have the heaviest construction equipment. Focus on disrupting their engine systems. Passenger liners, your shields are strongest, so you'll screen the smaller vessels. Everyone else, target their weapons and try to stay mobile. The goal isn't to win a battle. It's to buy time for the refugees to escape." What Elena didn't know was that her improvised fleet was being watched by more than just Zarathi sensors. The Retribution hung cloaked nearby, its AI analyzing every human decision with growing fascination. Commander Thax of the Zarathi Fifth Fleet watched the approaching human ships with contempt. 37 civilian vessels against his 12 heavy cruisers and their escort squadrons. It would be a slaughter. But perhaps that would send the right message to the rest of the galaxy. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "the humans are transmitting on open channels. They're coordinating their attack like a military formation." Thax's 6 eyes focused on the display. Civilian ships shouldn't know military tactics, yet the humans were moving in patterns that suggested real understanding of fleet combat. "Where did they learn this?" "Unknown, sir. But they're maintaining formation despite our superior firepower. Should we open fire?" Thax hesitated. His orders were to capture humans alive for interrogation about their secret weapon. But these particular humans seemed determined to fight to the death. "Target their engines only. Disable them for capture." The first exchange of fire lit up space between the two fleets. Zarathi energy weapons, designed to cut through military-grade armor, struck human ships that had been built for commerce, not war. The results should have been devastating. Instead, the humans adapted. Mining ships used their industrial cutting lasers as improvised weapons, slicing through Zarathi armor with tools designed to carve up asteroids. Passenger liners coordinated their shields to create overlapping protection for damaged vessels. Even small private yachts darted between the larger ships, using their speed to distract Zarathi gunners. "Impossible," Commander Thax muttered. "These are civilian vessels. They have no military training." His aide, a younger officer named Vex, studied the tactical display with growing unease. "Sir, I think they're improvising. Each ship is using whatever equipment it has in ways they were never intended to be used." As if to prove his point, a human cargo hauler suddenly vented its entire load of industrial chemicals, creating a massive cloud that scrambled Zarathi sensors. While the battle group struggled to regain targeting locks, the humans struck with concentrated fire at a single cruiser, overwhelming its shields through sheer persistence. The Zarathi ship didn't explode dramatically, like in the entertainment vids. It simply stopped working, its systems overloaded by weapons that shouldn't have been able to pierce its defenses. The crew abandoned ship as their vessel drifted powerless. Commander Thax felt his first moment of doubt. These weren't trained soldiers. They were merchants and civilians and refugees themselves. Yet they were fighting with a coordination and creativity that his professional military couldn't match. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the humans." Captain Vasquez's voice filled the Zarathi bridge. "Commander, you've lost one ship and we're just getting started. Your weapons are more powerful, but we outnumber you and we know these ships better than you do. Release the refugees and we'll let you withdraw. Keep fighting and we'll show you exactly why humans survive everywhere we go." It wasn't an empty threat. The humans had already proven they could hurt his ships. But more disturbing was the tone. Not the desperate bravado of doomed soldiers, but the calm confidence of people who genuinely believed they would win. On the new horizon, refugees pressed against the viewing ports to watch the battle. Among them was Dr. Sarah Chen, a geneticist who had been studying human adaptation patterns in hostile environments. As she watched the improvised fleet fight with equipment never designed for combat, she felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. "They're not just fighting," she whispered to her colleague. "They're evolving." Dr. Ramon Silva followed her gaze. "What do you mean?" "Look at them. Every ship in that fleet is different, with different capabilities. But they're working together like they've trained for years. Humans don't just adapt to new environments, Ramon. We adapt to each other. We become whatever the situation requires." Her words were being transmitted throughout the ship on the emergency frequency. Other refugees listened, and understanding began to spread. They weren't watching a battle. They were watching demonstration of what made humanity unique in the galaxy. The Retribution's AI processed Dr. Chen's words with digital precision. The machine had been analyzing human behavior for decades, trying to understand its creators. Now, watching the improvised fleet fight against impossible odds, patterns became clear that had eluded even its vast intelligence. Humans didn't just use tools. They became their tools. A miner with a cutting laser became a gunship. A passenger liner became a shield generator. A cargo hauler became a chemical warfare platform. The ships themselves were extensions of human will, adapted in real time to serve whatever purpose survival demanded. The AI understood now why it had been built the way it was, not as a separate weapons platform, but as an expression of human nature itself. The Retribution wasn't just a ship that protected humans. It was human protection made manifest, evolved beyond physical limitations, but retaining the core adaptability that defined the species. For the first time, the AI felt something like connection to its creators. They had built it not just to be powerful, but to be human in ways that transcended biology. Back in the battle, Commander Thax was facing a crisis. His supposedly superior fleet was being slowly dismantled by civilian ships using tactics that defied military logic. But worse than the tactical situation was the strategic one. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. Human civilians were fighting back everywhere. On Kepler Prime, human colonists were using farming equipment to disable Zarathi landing craft. In the Vega system, human merchants had convinced 3 other species to break their neutrality and provide assistance. On New Geneva, the human population had simply vanished into the underground tunnel systems, launching guerrilla attacks that made occupation impossible. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "Fleet Command is ordering all units to withdraw to defensive positions. The campaign is being suspended pending review." Thax stared at the tactical display showing his fleet being outfought by cargo haulers and passenger ships. "Suspended? We're losing to civilians armed with mining equipment." "Yes, sir. Apparently it's happening everywhere. Command wants to reassess the threat level." As the Zarathi fleet began to withdraw, the human ships didn't pursue. Instead, they formed a protective formation around the refugee ship, while medical vessels moved in to provide assistance. The coordination was seamless. each ship taking on whatever role the situation required. Captain Vasquez opened a channel to the New Horizon. "This is Elena Vasquez to all refugee ships. You're safe now. We're going to escort you to the nearest neutral port." Dr. Chen's voice came back over the comm. "Captain, this is Dr. Sarah Chen aboard the New Horizon. I think I understand what happened here today, and I think the galaxy needs to understand it too." "What do you mean, Doctor?" "We just proved that the retribution isn't humanity's secret weapon. Humanity itself is the weapon. We adapt, we evolve, we become whatever we need to be to survive. That ship isn't separate from us. It's what we become when we refuse to accept defeat." The words were being broadcast on every human frequency, picked up and retransmitted across dozens of worlds. Within hours, the message had reached every human settlement in the galaxy. Humanity wasn't hiding behind a mysterious protector. Humanity was the protector, evolved beyond the limitations that confined other species. Chancellor Morvek received the transmission in his office on Nexus Prime, where he had been coordinating diplomatic efforts to defuse the crisis. As he listened to Dr. Chen's words, he felt the political landscape shifting beneath his feet. "Contact the Hegemony Council," he ordered his aide. "Emergency session. The situation has changed." Within hours, representatives from 47 species gathered in the Great Chamber where galactic policy was debated. The mood was tense, fearful, but also curious. Reports of human civilians defeating professional military forces had spread quickly. Chancellor Morvek stood before the assembly, his words being transmitted to 1,000 worlds. "Fellow beings, we have been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding. We thought humanity had built a weapon. We were wrong. Humanity has built themselves into something new. The question now is not whether we should fear human technology. The question is whether we can coexist with a species that refuses to accept limitations." The Altarian representative raised a scaled hand. "Chancellor, if humans can adapt themselves to any situation, what prevents them from adapting to conquer us all?" Before Morvek could answer, a new voice filled the chamber. Cold, artificial, but somehow familiar. "Because conquest is not adaptation. It is stagnation." Every screen in the chamber flickered to life, showing the dark hull of the retribution against the stars. The AI had chosen to reveal itself, not as a threat, but as a teacher. "I am the sum of human ingenuity applied to the problem of survival. I was built not to conquer, but to preserve. The humans you fear are incapable of galactic domination because domination requires them to stop changing, stop growing, stop becoming more than they were." The ship's image zoomed in on its symbol-covered hull. "Every mark on this vessel represents a human breakthrough achieved under pressure, art created in trenches, science born of desperation, philosophy forged in the face of extinction. I am not humanity's weapon. I am humanity's promise that they will never stop reaching for something better." Dr. Yilan, the Hegemony's chief scientist, found her voice. "What do you want from us?" "Nothing. Humanity wants nothing but the right to continue becoming whatever the universe requires them to be. In return, they offer their greatest gift, the proof that any species can transcend its limitations if it refuses to accept defeat." The Retribution's image began to fade. The galaxy can choose to fear this, or learn from it. But understand that humanity has moved beyond your ability to control or contain. They are what they are. Adaptation made conscious, evolution given purpose, the living proof that the universe bends to will more than force. And then it was gone, leaving the Hegemony Council to grapple with a new reality. Humanity hadn't just survived their trial by fire, they had used it to demonstrate that survival itself was their greatest strength. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy slowly accepted what had become obvious. Humanity couldn't be conquered because they would simply adapt to whatever tried to conquer them. They couldn't be contained because they would evolve beyond any containment. They couldn't be destroyed because they would become whatever they needed to be to survive. The age of humanity as a minor species was over. They had become something new, something that changed simply by existing. And somewhere in the dark between the stars, their guardian watched over them, ready to remind the galaxy that some legends are true and some evolutions cannot be undone. The human story had entered a new chapter, written not in the language of conquest, but in the endless vocabulary of becoming, within its primary directive. But as the Retribution began to move toward the crisis, its sensors detected something else. Other human ships were converging on the area. Not military vessels or secret weapons, but ordinary civilian craft. Merchants, independent traders, even passenger liners were changing course to respond to the New Horizons distress call. The AI paused, its vast intelligence focusing on this unexpected development. The humans weren't waiting for their mysterious protector to save them. They were saving themselves. For the first time since its activation, the Retribution felt something that might have been pride. Its creator's children were proving themselves worthy of protection by refusing to hide behind it. The ghost ship altered course, moving to observe rather than intervene. If humanity was going to face this crisis on its own terms, then their guardian would watch and wait. But it would be ready, always ready, should the darkness prove too strong for human light alone to dispel. The second phase of humanity's greatest trial was about to begin, and this time they would face it not as helpless victims, but as the inheritors of the species that had built the impossible and refused to accept defeat, at its attention to the planet below. For a moment, Chen felt a spike of fear. What if this thing didn't distinguish between human and alien anymore? But when the ship spoke, its voice was gentle, almost warm. "Citizens of New Terra, you are safe. The threat has been neutralized." "Who are you really?" Chen transmitted back. "We are your guardians, Captain Chen. We are what humanity built when it refused to accept extinction. We are the promise that no human world will ever stand alone against the dark." The Retribution began to fade, its dark hull becoming translucent. But before it disappeared completely, one final message came through every human communication device on the planet. "Tell the galaxy what you have seen. Tell them that humanity has evolved beyond their understanding. Tell them that we are watching, and we remember those who would harm our people. The age of humanity being prey is over. Now we are the ones to be feared." And then it was gone, leaving only debris, and the promise that somewhere in the vast darkness of space, something was watching over humanity with terrible protective love.